Ladies and gentlemen, there's a very important congressional race going on in our biggest state. We call it Alaska. Fantastic state. I've never been there. Our candidate is Nick Begich. He's running for Congress in the seat. They're Alaskans for nickbegich.com, B-E-G-I-C-H. You know, I watch all these shows about Alaska, and I love it. The mountain men and all the rest of it, the fishing and and I say, you know what, I can't handle that environment. Why? I love nature, but I love to be inside looking outside at it. And so I really admire people who can get into that. Now, Nick Begich, how are you, sir? And tell us about your race, because this is a very important race, the speaker told me.
Very important race up here in Alaska. We've got a Democrat representing the state of Alaska for the first time in 49 years, and we need to make that change. This is our opportunity to flip the seat, grow the House majority. Alaska's a red state. You're going to see Donald Trump carry Alaska by more than 10 points, and we need to make sure that we're returning a Republican to the House to represent this all-important state for the country. You know, Alaska has more resources than any other state in the nation. Minerals, oil and gas, timber, fish. We provide 60% of the nation's seafood in Alaska. So it's important that we have a pro-resource person representing our state in the Congress, not just for Alaska, but for the entire nation.
So, Nick Begich, tell the nation a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your opponent.
Well, I'll tell you, she's a hard-left Democrat who pretends to be a moderate. She votes with Nancy Pelosi 90% of the time, voting with Biden and Harris more than 80% of the time. And that simply doesn't reflect the values of hardworking Alaskans. There was a survey done here recently that showed Alaskans of all the states in the nation work more hours per week than any other state in the country, and our representative currently has one of the worst attendance records in the entire Congress. I'm a hard worker. I come from the business side. I didn't grow up in government, unlike my opponent, who spent essentially all of her career on the government side. I come from the private sector, and I believe that's where the innovation that has made the American way of life possible originates. And we need to reduce the size of government, reduce the footprint of government in our daily lives, and allow the private sector to flourish. That's how we're going to grow this economy again.
Now, what about your background and her background?
Yeah, I mean, she has spent her entire career in government. And my background, I'm an entrepreneur, started a number of businesses, and have spent the bulk of my career in technology. So my background is helping startups, early-stage companies at the PowerPoint deck stage, earliest stage, figure out how to build a business, how to find customers, how to build a product, how to find financing for their companies, and how to build teams. And that's what I've done over the last 20 years, because I really believe that startup economy, that early-stage economy, is what drives the next generation of flourishing big businesses in our nation. And those become the employers. We know that. Small business becomes the employment engine for our nation. And we have someone in the seat right now who's never started a business, has barely worked for one in her entire life, and simply is disconnected from the real world in that sense.
Alaskans for nickbegich.com, Alaskans for Nick Begich, Begich.com. Does it help you or hurt you if I endorse you?
I'd be honored to have your endorsement. And before I was a candidate for Congress, I listened to you on the radio all the time. I'm a huge fan.
Well, I want to endorse you because I want us to win that seat, because Alaskans deserve people who actually share their values. You know, we down here in the continental United States, we look at Alaska as really one of the few frontiers left, and obviously not everybody. There's towns in Alaska too, but one of the few frontiers that's left. It's got a remarkable history. And it's funny how representatives and senators from New York and Massachusetts and California want to control the resources in Alaska, and you have a member of the House of Representatives that agrees with them, yes?
She does. You know, we recently had a bill actually brought forward by Representative Pete Stauber of the great state of Minnesota called the Alaska's Right to Produce Act that pushes back against 67 executive orders that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have issued specifically targeting Alaska's ability to produce resources and access those resources. And so he introduces this bill in the House Resources Committee. Our current representative co-sponsored the bill, was all for it. It hits the House floor, and she decides she's had a change of heart and encourages all of her Democrat colleagues to vote no on that bill. She's a co-sponsor, tells people vote no on the bill, and then when it comes up for the vote, she doesn't vote yes, and she actually didn't have the guts to vote no. She voted present. And I can tell you as an Alaskan, that is an affront to everything we believe. We are hardworking people who tell it like it is, and we got a representative that's not doing that for us.
Yeah, no, she does it purposely so she can say one thing to one group and one thing to another, which is really a Svengali. Now, how's the fundraising going, she versus you?
I'll tell you, we just had a quarterly report came out yesterday. We had our best quarter yet, raised nearly $1 million, but she came in, she raised nearly $5 million.
That's amazing.
And that's how serious the Democrats are at trying to regain control of the House, because we know with high confidence we're going to get the Senate back. Donald Trump will win the presidency because our people are going to turn out. We are motivated, and we're doing that. We're seeing that in early voting. If you're listening out there today, as was said before the break, make sure you're voting. Take nothing for granted at all. But we're going to get those two. But we've got to hold the House. If we don't hold the House, we can't move Donald Trump's agenda through in the next 4 years.
And if we lose Alaska on election night, that's going to be a very bad bellwether, as far as I'm concerned. We got a race there in Nebraska, some of these states. You know, I'd like to hold you over the break, if I might, Nick. And the thing is, you have a very weird voting system there that was set up. There was a period of time where the Democrats win because the Republicans are killing each other. But it looks like that's been resolved, that the Republicans have united behind you, and now it's a one-on-one race. Is that correct?
That's correct. We do. We have a ranked choice voting system, and if you see this come up in your state, my strong advice to you is to do everything you can to prevent it from taking hold, because it has been gained by the left in order to win districts that they have no business representing.
So we're highlighting races around the country. I can't do them all. They're all very, very important, obviously, where you live. But some of these other races where we have an opportunity to pick up seats, to knock out incumbents, or there's empty seats. Alaska's a prime target with Nick Begich, who's a terrific candidate. Alaskans for nickbegich.com, BEGICH.com. What is your sense? What's going on in Alaska? Are our people, that is Republicans, conservatives, libertarians, do they seem fired up? Or does the other side seem fired up?
They are fired up. Republicans, independents, libertarians, you name it. If they're center to right of center, they are fired up to take this country back. They've seen the effects of Harris and Biden and their team in the Congress on our nation. We have an inflationary environment that we just can't seem to get out of because the left doesn't seem to understand it's their policies, not businesses, not the private sector, the policies of government that are creating the challenges that we have in life today. And it's simply a lack of discipline in D.C., where they're printing money to pay bills. And when you do that, you're going to get inflation.
By the way, just the weekly grind flying from Alaska to Washington, D.C., should you win. How long is that flight? I'm sure there's not a direct flight. How long is that?
Well, they just started up a direct flight, but it's seasonal. We have to fly about 1,500 miles just about to get to Seattle from Anchorage. Then the trip begins. So it's a long haul. Yeah, it is a long haul. It's actually closer from the East Coast to Europe than it is from Alaska to D.C. in terms of time in the seat.
And what town do you live in?
So I live just north of Anchorage, and just to give folks a sense, Alaska is about 2.5 times the size of Texas. So when you have just one representative for a state that large, even when someone like me is not traveling to what we call the lower 48, we're traveling in-state. Just last week, I went from Anchorage to Kodiak, which is one of the nation's largest islands, nation's largest Coast Guard base, for a debate on fisheries for 2 hours, went from there up to Fairbanks for a chamber debate, back down to Anchorage the same day for another debate, and then down to on the Kenai Peninsula, and then back to Juneau, our capital, which is hundreds and hundreds of miles away. You have to fly from Anchorage to Juneau. So it's a big place already as it is.
You have to fly a lot of these sort of these hopper planes, I call them, where you got, these single engine planes. Do you have to do a lot of that? Because, we know of terrible stories where you've lost a congressman, you lost a senator. The weather can get pretty rough out there.
It can, and actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because today is the anniversary of my grandfather's disappearance on one of those planes. He was with Hale Boggs, who was the House Majority Leader, and that was October 16th, 1972. Their plane disappeared and was never found. So, yes, absolutely. To access many of these areas of the state, it requires those single-engine planes, two-seater, four-seater planes. You're flying out in order to get there. There's no other way.
Wow, that's kind of nerve-wracking. And the travel you talk about and so forth and so on, and you really do have to go into smaller communities. You do need to meet the people. The television coverage, is it throughout the state?
It is. It's throughout the state. Thank God for Elon Musk, because he's connecting so much of Alaska to the internet, to the rest of the world through Starlink, which we do have up here in Alaska. And I'll tell you what we really need in our state are more roads. The resources of our nation that are here in Alaska, we can't get to them because we don't have enough highways, we don't have enough roads, we don't have the infrastructure that we need, because we are still, relative to other states, a very young state. But it's estimated that Alaska has more undiscovered oil and gas resources than anywhere else in the country. And we've got to do more to expand the ability to access critical minerals, base metals, precious metals, and the rare earths that we have in abundance in Alaska. A lot of people around the nation aren't familiar with just how much abundance is here in Alaska. And when we see Biden and Harris issue 67 executive orders trying to shut our state down, I tell folks, look, if you're on the right or you're on the left or you're somewhere in the middle, you should care about doing things right, developing resources right. And when they shut down one of the world's most responsible jurisdictions in Alaska in exchange for places like Russia and China, Afghanistan, and Iran.
Crazy.
That's wrong. That is crazy. People on the left should be demanding to open up Alaska, and they're shutting us down, not because they care about the earth, but because they want to see a political outcome where they can get 2 Senate seats out of our state by turning our resources and the conservative voters that come along with them off.
And, the people of Alaska have been lied to by Washington over and over and over again. These deals that are made that you can only drill in certain parts of Alaska, and then they take those certain parts of Alaska and they say, actually, you can't drill there either. Isn't that right?
That's right. There have been permits that have actually been issued and then later pulled because you have an overactive bureaucracy. I call it cubicle lawmaking, where you have these regulatory agencies run amok that try to make and pass, and they're successful passing regulations through that have the force and effect of law, but they've never been passed through Congress. And this is where the Supreme Court's decision on Chevron Deference, to overturn Chevron Deference, is huge for our state, because it forces the issues back to the Congress, where we are supposed to make precise and clear laws for the regulatory agencies, not deferring that lawmaking to a largely woke bureaucracies in government that want to see resource development shut off.
It's one of the greatest decisions of modern times, the reversal of the Chevron case, and we've talked about it here. And basically, the position of the Supreme Court and the government before this was the massive bureaucracy typically has the final say, and that the courts have to view that as pretty much the final say. And so the pressure is on the plaintiff or the person who brings the complaint, the complainant, to demonstrate why it shouldn't be, which is typically an impossible standard. And so the court now said, no, wait a minute. The bureaucracy's out of control. We see what it's done. We made a mistake. And so it will not be assumed that their final decision is the final say. And now you have actual judicial review. honest judicial review of these decisions being made. And it matters to states like Alaska, Montana, and Wyoming. It matters to all of us, as a matter of fact. So, Nick Begich, what would you like to leave the audience with? Let's give your side again. What kind of help you need? And what kind of argument you want to make in the final moments here?
I want people to understand something so important that we seem to have lost in our country. And it's this idea. This nation belongs to you. This is your country. This is your nation. Every 2 years, you have an opportunity to go to the polls and tell the world what you think. That's our responsibility. That's our job as citizens. We can't fall down on the job. We have to take our country back, because I'll tell you what, if we don't show up at those polls, someone else on the left is going to show up for you and tell you how you're going to live your life. Get out there and vote, and make sure you're bringing people with you. That is critically important if we're going to take this nation back, if we're going to get the Senate, if we're going to get the House, if we're going to get Donald Trump elected. That's what we have to do. So please get involved, donate, do everything you can, because this election is the most important of our lifetimes.
There's no question about it. It absolutely is, because the left has made it clear it's the most important election of their lifetime, because they feel that they just need one more victory, one more control of the White House, the Senate, and the House to make permanent changes that we can never undo, right?
That's right. They are activists. They have religion around their politics, and they will do everything they can, legal and illegal, in order to attempt to win. And so we have got to make sure we are turning out in large numbers. Bring your family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, you name it. Bring them to the polls, and we're going to take this country back this November.
I think you'd be a great congressman. I endorse you wholeheartedly. My brothers and sisters in Alaska, please vote early and make sure your friends and colleagues and family members who are supportive of our position do exactly the same thing. And remember, you can go to Alaskansfornickbegich.com. That's Begich, Alaskansfornickbegich.com. And I wish you all the best, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Keep up the fight. Let's win this.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.